All right, shalom, shalom, shalom. You are live and direct once again with your Akazaki Yahoo, and I'm giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahweh, Bashem, Hamashiach, Wamalak, Yahweh Shai, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say shalom, wa baruchim, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day when the Most High brings us back together and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies, our adversaries, and all those who hate us under our feet. All praises to the Almighty Yah. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Yes, indeed. I'm joined this evening by my most esteemed Akinanaya. Shalom, Aki.
Hey, Shalom, Aki. Shalom, Yasharal. Call Halal Yahweh. Bahashem, Hamashiach, Wa Malak, Yahweh Shah, Barakatah.
All right, yes, indeed. All praises to Yahweh in the name of his beloved Son, Yahweh Shai, the Messiah. Bless you. Yes, indeed. So we are back this Yom Shishi evening for another video review. We are going to review a video from the good brothers over at Black Journals. Shout out to those brothers doing wonderful work as always. And this name of this video is called Black Americans Watched How the Government Stalked Black People. So this looks like it's going to be very interesting. Let's go ahead and get to it and get through it. Here we go. All right, here we go.
Imagine living every day of your life under watchful eyes. For Black people in the United States, surveillance and scrutiny have followed them for centuries. From the moment the first enslaved Africans were forced onto North American soil, white authorities claimed the power to watch and control their every move. The methods changed over the years, but the purpose remained the same: to keep Black Americans under their watch. Even today, that quiet surveillance has not fully disappeared. But why has a nation that proclaims liberty been so obsessed with keeping Black people under its gaze? This is the history they rarely teach, and the truth they hope you never confront. Give this video a like to show your support, and join us through history as we uncover the long and chilling history of how the United States has tracked Black people for centuries. Once you hear this, you'll never look at American history the same way again. To begin, let's go all the way back to the 18th century. During the height of American slavery, nights in the South were warm, quiet, and crawling with danger for any Black person who dared to step outside after dark. The only sounds were crickets and the soft clop of hooves on dirt roads. Lanterns swung in the fists of armed white men as they patrolled the countryside. These were the slave patrols, the law of the land for Black people. Their orders are to catch any Black person out without permission, to hunt down escapees, and to terrorize those who even dream of freedom. Slave patrols first emerged as early as 1704 in South Carolina, long before the United States was founded. They were among the earliest forms of policing on American soil, and their target was enslaved Black people. These patrols roamed plantations and country roads at night, ready to whip or arrest any Black person found without a written pass from a slaveholder. White patrollers had the legal authority to invade slave cabins, break up gatherings, and inflict brutal punishment on anyone deemed a threat. For the enslaved, there was no hiding. The law made every white man with a gun into an overseer. But why go to such extremes? The reality is, the South's entire wealth and social order rested on the backs of enslaved Black people at the time, and those in power knew it was fragile. Plantation owners and colonial officials lived with a constant gnawing fear that the very people they brutalized could rise up against them. Every rumor of a rebellion, every story of a runaway was a reminder that their control existed only through violence and terror. So beyond the patrols, white authorities devised an even more cunning tool: informants. Slaveholders coerced or bribed certain enslaved individuals to spy on others and report any whisper of resistance. Tragically, some of the most daring planned uprisings were foiled from within. In 1800, An enslaved blacksmith named Gabriel Prosser marshaled a secret army of slaves near Richmond, Virginia, plotting to seize the city. On the eve of the rebellion, 2 informants betrayed the plan to authorities, and Gabriel and dozens of his compatriots were captured and hanged. Years later, in 1822, in Charleston, South Carolina, a freed man named Denmark Vesey organized an even larger rebellion involving thousands of slaves. Once again, a slave informer revealed the conspiracy, leading to mass arrests and executions. These betrayals, born of a climate of surveillance and fear, crushed Black resistance before it could roar to life. Enslaved people resisted these measures in whatever ways they could. They whispered secret plans and followed the North Star when they fled. The famous liberator Harriet Tubman had to constantly outsmart the patrols and bounty hunters. She altered her escape routes and travel times to avoid their dragnet, knowing that armed posses and even bloodhounds were on the hunt. The very existence of the Underground Railroad, a covert network of safe houses for Black people, revealed just how heavily the South was surveilled. Escape demanded absolute secrecy to evade the constant eyes and ears of the slave system. White surveillance was not confined to the South either. In the northern colonies and states, where slavery also existed in the 1700s, authorities passed laws to keep Black people visible and vulnerable. New York City, for example, enacted a notorious lantern law after a slave revolt scare. Under this law, any Black or indigenous person walking after sunset without a white escort had to carry a lit lantern. If a Black person was caught in the dark without a lantern, they could be whipped on the spot, up to 40 lashes. The intention was to literally illuminate Black movement, to make sure that no Black person could move unseen or assemble in secret at night. Every white citizen was empowered to stop any Black passerby after dark and demand they show a light. This was an early example of how laws turned racial bias into routine surveillance. Black people's very presence in public space was policed, their freedom of movement curtailed by the glow of a candle. Beyond local patrols and laws, the entire legal system supported the tracking of Black people as property. The U.S. Constitution itself contained a fugitive slave clause, and Congress passed Fugitive Slave Acts in 1793 and 1850 that empowered federal marshals and bounty hunters to seize escaped slaves, even in free northern states. This meant no Black person in America truly had the right to privacy or safety from capture. If a white man claimed that a Black person was his enslaved runaway, the law automatically favored the enslaver's word over the freedom of the accused. And so, free Black people lived under constant threat of being falsely identified and kidnapped. They carried freedom papers, documents proving their free status wherever they went, hoping to avoid a fate like that of Solomon Northup, a free Black man who was abducted and sold into slavery because he could not immediately prove who he was. In effect, Black Americans were the only people in the country who had to show papers just to move around or be left in peace. By the mid-19th century, whether enslaved or free, virtually every Black person in America lived under some form of surveillance. They were monitored by patrollers and neighbors, constrained by curfews and passes, and threatened by laws that made their very liberty tenuous. This was how a racist society maintained control, by keeping Black people always in sight, never out of reach. And yet, even the abolition of slavery in 1865 did not bring an end to the watching and the tracking. It simply forced the system to reinvent itself for a new era. The Civil War ended slavery in name, but in the South, it did not end the hunger to control Black bodies and lives. In 1865, as Black Americans celebrated emancipation, white lawmakers across former Confederate states swiftly passed Black codes, laws designed to chain Black people to their former enslavers' will. These codes varied by state, but their message was the same. Freedom for Black people would exist only on paper. Under Black codes, it became a crime for Black men to be unemployed or to wander without proof of a job. In Mississippi and South Carolina, for instance, Black workers were required to sign annual labor contracts. If they left their job or failed to have a white employer, they could be arrested for vagrancy. Other laws barred Black folks from owning firearms, restricted their ability to meet in groups, and imposed curfews. Where slavery once provided the excuse to whip or imprison a Black person, Now these petty offenses served the same purpose. When black people were arrested under these draconian codes, punishment was swift and cruel. Prisons filled up with black inmates guilty of crimes like walking at night or not having a job. But the southern states had no intention of just locking them up. They saw an opportunity to resurrect slavery under another name. Thus began the system of convict leasing. States and counties would lease their prisoners, the vast majority of whom were black, to private companies and plantations, renting out black labor to the highest bidder. Former slaves, now called convicts, were put to work in mines, fields, railroads, and brick yards under horrendous conditions. Companies paid the state a fee for each prisoner, and in exchange, they could literally work them to death. Unlike slave owners of old, these businessmen had no long-term interest in the lives of the laborers. If one prisoner died of exhaustion or disease, there was always another arrest to provide a replacement. In some labor camps, the death rates of leased convicts were staggering, a testament to how disposable black life had become in the eyes of the new order. Consider the story of Green Cottonham, a black man in Alabama. In 1908, decades after slavery was abolished, 22-year-old Cottonham was arrested for vagrancy, essentially for not having proof of employment at that moment. He had committed no real crime, yet within days, a judge had declared him guilty and sentenced him to pay a fine he could not afford. The county turned him over to U.S. Steel Corporation, which owned sprawling coal mines. Green Cottonham was forced into backbreaking labor underground, shackled and closely watched by armed guards. In the darkness of the mine, he and hundreds of other black men worked in deadly heat and toxic air, often until they collapsed. Records show that many leased convicts did not survive their terms. Disease, accidents, and beatings killed them by the tens of thousands. Cottonham himself never truly escaped. He died in that mine, a free man under the law, but a slave in all but name. The scale of this neo-slavery was vast. By the 1880s, every southern state had adopted convict leasing, and black men filled the labor camps. In some states, black prisoners made up over 90% of the convict labor force. It became a lucrative enterprise. Alabama's government, for example, drew a huge portion of its revenue from leasing convicts to mining companies in one year. As much as 3/4 of the state's entire budget came from this blood money. For the South's economy, it was as if slavery had never gone away, only been rebranded. And the tracking of black people continued through ever-present law officers, bounty hunters, and company guards. Sheriffs were even incentivized to arrest more black men, since more convicts meant more money. This system finally began to crack in the early 20th century, after journalists exposed its horrors and the death of a young white prisoner caused public outrage. State by state, convict leasing was outlawed. Alabama, the last holdout, officially ended it in 1928, and the federal government barred the practice during World War II. But even then, other forms of forced labor and surveillance persisted, from chain gangs working on roadsides under shotgun guard, to prison farms like Mississippi's notorious Parchman Farm, where black inmates continued to toil under a whip. Black freedom remained a conditional, monitored experience. If you were black and walked on the wrong street, said the wrong thing to a white person, or left a job without permission, the system would notice, and it would make you pay. By the turn of the 20th century, the message was clear. Black people might no longer be private property, but they were still kept under the close watch of the state. Formal slavery was gone, yet an entire legal regime, from black codes to chain gangs, had arisen to keep black Americans under surveillance and control. As black communities endured this oppression, they also began to organize and agitate for true freedom. That growing spark of resistance would soon meet a new evolution of the surveillance state, this time on a national scale. As the 20th century unfolded, black Americans did not remain silent under oppression. They founded newspapers to speak truth about lynching and injustice, built organizations to demand equality, and led movements of self-determination. But every step of progress was shadowed by a watchful eye. Now it was not just local sheriffs or night riders. It was the United States federal government. For the first time, a national surveillance apparatus aimed its focus at black citizens who dared to challenge the status quo. In the early 1900s, the nascent FBI, then called the Bureau of Investigation, began tracking what it called race agitators. Simply put, these were Black activists, journalists, and intellectuals advocating for their people's rights. One of the first was Ida B. Wells, a fearless Black journalist who traveled the country and the world crusading against the lynching of Black Americans. Wells publicized ugly truths that white authorities wanted hidden. She received death threats and had to move for her safety. It's little surprise that she also attracted attention from government agents who monitored her speeches and writings, viewing her as a potential source of unrest. The fact that a woman documenting racial terrorism was seen as a threat speaks volumes about the government's priorities at that time. No early Black leader, however, drew federal surveillance like Marcus Garvey. Garvey arrived in the United States from Jamaica, and by 1917 had ignited a mass movement unlike anything seen before. His organization, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or UNIA, claimed millions of members, parading through Harlem with banners proclaiming Black is beautiful and dreaming of economic independence and even a return to Africa. Garvey's bold message of Black pride and self-reliance made him a hero to the Black masses and a dire threat in the eyes of the U.S. government. Young Justice Department agent J. Edgar Hoover fixated on Garvey as an enemy to neutralize. Hoover hired the first Black FBI agents not to promote diversity, but to infiltrate Garvey's organization and find dirt on him. They listened in on meetings and combed through Garvey's mail. Eventually, the government charged Garvey with mail fraud on dubious evidence. He was convicted and imprisoned, and in 1927 he was deported from the country. The most prominent Black nationalist of the era had been effectively silenced. Hoover's campaign against Marcus Garvey was a blueprint. It showed how far federal agents would go to spy on and sabotage Black movements that challenged the racial order. Other influential Black voices also found themselves under federal watch. W.E.B. Du Bois, the scholar and NAACP co-founder, advocated tirelessly for Black political rights and even international Black solidarity. His speeches and publications were monitored for subversive ideas. Though Du Bois was a mainstream figure, the fact that he critiqued American racism put him in the FBI's files, especially as he grew more radical later in life. Activists who spoke of labor rights or global anti-colonialism were doubly suspect for being Black and for being Reds, meaning communists. During the First World War and the Red Scare that followed, federal agents scrutinized Black newspapers and organizations for any hint of disloyalty. They feared that Germany or the Bolsheviks might inspire Black Americans to rebel, so military intelligence operatives went undercover in Black communities. One Black journalist was court-martialed simply for writing that America should give true freedom to Black citizens at home before sending them to fight for freedom abroad. By the 1940s and 50s, the early civil rights movement was quietly taking shape, and so was an intensified government vigilance. The FBI under Hoover continued to expand its domestic surveillance. Black leaders who protested segregation or demanded voting rights became targets. Philip Randolph, who threatened a march on Washington in 1941 to force fair employment for Blacks, certainly drew FBI interest. Indeed, he succeeded in pressuring the president to act. When the NAACP and other groups challenged school segregation and racial discrimination, Southern police forces often spied on their meetings and funneled reports to state investigators. The atmosphere was heavy with suspicion, where any call for racial justice could be branded as communist-inspired sedition. African-American veterans of World War II returned home as decorated soldiers, but were treated as potential threats if they spoke out for equality. Across the country, pressure mounted toward an inevitable confrontation as Black Americans moved from quiet courtroom fights to mass demonstrations in the streets. Meanwhile, Hoover's FBI was already preparing its most notorious program to strike back. It is a bitter irony that even as Black Americans won legal victories in the 1950s and 60s, their triumphs played out under intense government surveillance. The Civil Rights era, with its boycotts, marches, and calls for Black dignity, was met by a secret war from federal and local law enforcement. At the forefront was FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who by now saw Black activism as one of the greatest internal threats to America. Under his direction, the FBI launched a sweeping covert operation to undermine these movements. Its name was innocuous, COINTELPRO, short for Counterintelligence Program, but its methods were ruthless. COINTELPRO had one overriding goal: prevent the rise of any Black leader or group that could challenge white authority. From roughly 1956 to the early 1970s, the FBI devoted countless resources to spying on, discrediting, and disrupting Black organizations. No group was off limits. They bugged the phones and hotel rooms of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., hoping to find something, anything, to tarnish the civil rights icon's reputation. They followed Malcolm X and infiltrated the Nation of Islam. They planted informers inside the NAACP, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, and every other civil rights group they could. Hoover particularly feared what he called Black nationalist hate groups, by which he meant militant or even outspoken Black organizations. As the Black Power movement emerged, the FBI targeted the Black Panther Party with ferocious intensity. Agents drew up lists of Black figures to watch, everyone from famous singers and athletes who voiced political opinions to grassroots organizers in local communities. The FBI's own documents bluntly stated their intent was to, quote, expose, disrupt, misdirect, or otherwise neutralize Black nationalist movements. The tactics of COINTELPRO were often illegal and always unethical. Agents wiretapped phones without court orders, intercepted mail, and recorded private conversations. They spread misinformation, sending anonymous letters to cause distrust between Black leaders, and leaking fabricated stories to the press to smear movement activists as criminals or communists. In one notorious case, the FBI anonymously mailed Dr. King a letter threatening to expose his personal life and urging him to commit suicide. King, who was already under immense strain, recognized it as a government attempt to break his spirit. Hoover even publicly denounced Martin Luther King as, quote, the most notorious liar in the country, prompting King to defend himself and seek a face-to-face meeting with Hoover. This was the climate civil rights leaders faced. Even as they nonviolently protested for justice, the state treated them like enemies of the state. For Black activists who embraced more radical stances or self-defense, the response was even harsher. The Black Panthers, who advocated for Black self-determination and monitored police brutality, were infiltrated at every level by informants. In 1969, a 21-year-old Panther leader named Fred Hampton in Chicago was making waves by forming multiracial alliances and feeding poor children with a free breakfast program. He caught the FBI's attention as a potential messiah figure. In December of that year, thanks to information from an FBI informant planted as Hampton's bodyguard, Chicago police raided his apartment in a pre-dawn assault. They shot Hampton to death as he lay in bed, unable to even raise his head. He had been drugged by the informant earlier that night. The killing of Fred Hampton was essentially an assassination, and it highlighted just how far the U.S. government would go. In the aftermath, evidence of FBI involvement in the raid emerged, confirming that this was the deadly culmination of surveillance and infiltration. Earlier that same year, Malcolm X had been assassinated in New York after years of being hounded and watched. Only decades later did investigations uncover that some of Malcolm's closest associates, including one of his security detail, were undercover informants for the police. His family still suspects that government agencies knew more about the plot on his life than they ever revealed. The pattern was chilling. Charismatic voices that could rally Black Americans, whether nonviolent like King or militant like Malcolm, were systematically undermined or eliminated under the watch of this covert surveillance regime. By the early 1970s, this dirty war had taken its toll. Many Black organizations were fractured or destroyed. Leaders were dead, imprisoned on exaggerated charges, or driven into exile. For example, Black Panther leader Eldridge Cleaver fled the country. Those who remained active knew that almost any telephone call or meeting could be monitored. In 1971, the public finally got a glimpse behind the curtain when activists broke into an FBI office and leaked COINTELPRO files to the media. Americans were shocked at the extent of the government's campaign against its own citizens. Congressional hearings in the mid-1970s condemned these tactics as abuses of power, and the FBI claimed it shut down COINTELPRO. But for Black Americans, the damage was done. An entire generation had been fighting not just Jim Crow, but also a hidden enemy that knew their every move. Still, the desire to surveil Black citizens did not disappear with COINTELPRO. It would resurface in new forms in the decades to come, under the banners of war on crime and war on drugs. With the open turmoil of the 1960s behind them, many Americans may have assumed the era of heavy-handed surveillance had passed, but for Black communities, the scrutiny never stopped. It merely adapted. In the 1970s and 80s, the rhetoric shifted to law and order. Crime and drug addiction in inner cities became national obsessions. In practice, this meant an intensified focus on Black neighborhoods by police and federal agents. The war on drugs brought military-style raids and wiretaps in predominantly Black areas, and a generation of young Black men found themselves cataloged as suspects in newly created gang databases. If you were a Black teen wearing certain colors or standing on a street corner with friends, police might label you a potential gang member and keep your name on file. This was another kind of mass surveillance, not cameras in the sky, but officers on every block, informants on every other corner, and an assumption that Black people were inherently up to no good. Even Black success in culture drew watchful eyes. By the late 1980s, hip-hop music had exploded as the voice of urban Black youth, a voice often critical of police and conditions in Black communities. Rappers who spoke truth to power suddenly found themselves monitored like threats. Legendary rap groups like Public Enemy and NWA released songs condemning police brutality. The FBI infamously sent NWA a warning letter over their song "Fix the Police," an unprecedented move to intimidate musicians. At concerts, plainclothes officers mingled in the crowds, noting lyrics and scanning for any spark of trouble. In New York, the police department went so far as to form a secret rap intelligence unit dedicated to tracking rap artists, following them, recording their license plates, and keeping dossiers on who they associated with. Other cities' police forces, from Los Angeles to Miami, soon set up similar units. To many officers, the new generation of outspoken Black artists and entrepreneurs looked like gang leaders by another name. They feared these rappers could incite violence or unify youth against authority, so they responded the only way they knew: surveillance and more surveillance. As technology progressed, so did the reach of the surveillance state. By the 2000s, cameras watched every city block, and emerging tools like facial recognition and social media tracking gave police unprecedented powers. But history showed those powers would be used most aggressively on communities of color. Police departments adopted predictive policing algorithms that sent extra patrols to Black neighborhoods, effectively flagging those residents as potential criminals before anything happened. And when Black Americans in the 2010s once again rallied for justice under the banner of Black Lives Matter, the old patterns resurfaced almost immediately. The spark came in August 2014, when Michael Brown, an unarmed Black teenager, was shot and killed by a white police officer in Ferguson, Missouri. His body lay in the street for hours, and images from the scene spread across the country, igniting anger and grief. Protests erupted in Ferguson and quickly spread to cities nationwide. Instead of treating the demonstrations as a call for justice, law enforcement responded as if confronting an enemy. Snipers took positions on rooftops, armored vehicles rolled through neighborhoods, and streets began to resemble a war zone. Behind the scenes, the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI were monitoring online communications, tracking Facebook events, Twitter hashtags, and the movements of organizers who dared to speak out. Some activists reported mysterious phone calls and social media messages that had all the hallmarks of intimidation. It became known that the FBI had coined a new label: Black Identity Extremists, essentially grouping Black civil rights protesters with violent domestic criminals. Under this pretext, they surveilled and questioned activists around the country, despite no evidence that Black Lives Matter was anything but a peaceful movement seeking accountability. One young activist in 2015, learned just how closely she was being watched. As she traveled by car to attend protests in several cities, she noticed the same cars and faces shadowing her. Later, it came out through FBI documents obtained by The Intercept that agents had been tracking her movements across state lines, using informants and stakeouts, all because she was vocal in Black Lives Matter. This kind of interstate surveillance harkened back to the days of hunting fugitive slaves, only now with high-tech surveillance vans instead of horses. It was a reminder that, in the eyes of the state, a Black person raising their voice still raises alarm bells in the surveillance machinery. Today, virtually everyone leaves digital footprints, but Black Americans have uniquely felt the brunt of being monitored both offline and online. Police use social media to identify and arrest Black youth for minor infractions or perceived gang ties. Facial recognition software, which has been adopted by many departments, has repeatedly misidentified Black faces, leading to innocent people being wrongfully arrested. The combination of biased technology and biased policing means Black people can be marked as suspicious by an algorithm and find armed officers at their door the next day. In many cities, networks of CCTV cameras are concentrated in Black and poor neighborhoods, an electronic extension of the old lantern laws, ensuring that those historically deemed a problem population are always visible, always watched. Even seemingly benign public safety measures can take on an ominous edge. Consider how during the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests, law enforcement flew drones and surveillance planes over marches, recording the faces and movements of citizens simply exercising their rights. To be Black in America is still, in a very real sense, to be under surveillance. Yet through it all, the Black community continues to resist and innovate. They use smartphones to record police encounters, turning surveillance back on the authorities. They encrypt communications and organize in decentralized ways to stay steps ahead of prying eyes. The struggle for liberation has always involved outsmarting the overseer, whether that overseer carried a whip or wore an FBI badge. As we look around today at the debates over privacy, policing, and big data, it's worth remembering that Black Americans have lived under a surveillance society for generations, and it was never truly about safety or justice, but about power. White authorities feared Black freedom, so they built an apparatus to watch and contain it. This is how the U.S. tracked Black people for centuries, with lanterns and slave catchers, with laws and lies, with cameras and covert operations. The details changed, but the target remained the same. For too long, America's response to Black aspiration has been to clamp down, to surveil and suspect. But imagine instead, if that energy had gone into justice and equality, what kind of nation might have grown? This narrative has not been a pleasant one, but it is a necessary one. To move forward, we must confront how a country founded on liberty allowed this to happen, and how it continues in new forms. Only by facing it can we ensure that the next generations of Black children grow up not as subjects of suspicion, but as equal participants in an America that finally lives up to its ideals. If you found this discussion eye-opening, don't let it stop here. Check out our other...
Man, what a deep discussion and a deep, uncovering. Because we knew these things were around. What we didn't realize was that this was a ongoing situation from slavery. They had you had to have a lantern. I didn't know about that. That's news to me. But if you were moving about, you had to have a lantern if you didn't have an escort. I know in the movies they would say you had to have a pass, and it would be some kind of something. But I wonder if they did that just to kind of clean it up, and if it was actually, 'cause I think we've all seen that, where's your pass and that type of thing.
Where's your papers?
Your papers, whatever it is. And but from what Black John is showing us, looks like it was actually a lantern at night, maybe at night. So, wow. COINTELPRO never ceases to amaze. I wish I could meet Hoover and put my shake, shake his head. Not his hand, his head. But I know he's long dead. Little Creed, and that's probably the best thing that happened to him. But anyway, wow. And yeah, just recently with these situations and these circumstances where our people were mishandled, mistreated, and murdered, executed, they were still surveilling. They're still looking for information, black identity extremists, because they know good and doggone well that a whooping coming their way, and they trying to do everything in the earth to keep it back as long as they can. But when Hamashiach show up, ain't gonna be no keeping back. And I know these heathens know that. I know they know. I know they understand these things. Nevertheless, they do what they can while they can, and it won't last forever. Trouble won't last always. It's gonna come a time where restoration is gonna be in place for the so-called Negroes. And I'm gonna go ahead and rest there before I get too hot. Go ahead, Aki.
I had the chance to recently travel to Chicago last weekend and was able to go to the Disabled Museum over on it's over by the hospital, University of Chicago Hospital, like maybe a block or so away from there.
Yeah.
But they in the museum they had an exhibit, talking about Fred Hampton, and it's upsetting because you think about what those brothers were doing.
Yeah.
They had a free breakfast program that was funded by the donations that they were collecting. You know what I mean? The alms that the people were giving them to take care of the neighborhood children, to ensure that they had something to eat.
Right.
He was doing this at the same time in Chicago. You've had gangs in Chicago. Well, they call them gangs, by definition, is someone who is getting into illegal activity, but it's a common phenomenon for brothers to group together. So I'm gonna call them brothers, but the city called them and the government called them gangs. And you take away a leader like Fred Hampton, you take a leader away like Jeff Ford, you take a leader away like Larry Hoover, and you have the conditions of Chicago the way that they are now. So these atrocities continue today, but we don't make a big enough fuss about it. And you don't necessarily have to fuss by even saying anything.
Right.
You can fuss by gravitating towards what that system is trying to break down, build it up the way that those brothers was trying to do. But it's upsetting. These surveillance programs continue today, not only by the government, but you've got outside agencies. I want our listeners to be aware that there's a couple of videos on Elder Benai Israel's channel over there, and you'll see that these agencies continue to trouble us.
Right.
And I use that word trouble us for a reason. Can you find that in 2 Thessalonians of what a righteous thing is to those who trouble us?
Good thinking. Good pull. 2 Thessalonians. Give me 1 second here.
God.
Indeed. To all those who trouble you.
But you know, what's been done, it hasn't been forgotten. It's in the word, it's in the Most High's word that, you know, our iniquities, our sins, he's going to forgive and remember no more,
Right.
and receive us as his son, you know, as his children. But did you find that out?
I got it, Khan. Indeed. Here it
Yeah,
is.
bring it out, Aki.
All right. We'll put it on the screen. All right. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 and verse 6. Seeing it is a righteous thing for the Most High to recompense tribulation to them that trouble you. To those that trouble us, it is a righteous thing that the Most High to recompense tribulation to them that trouble you. That was beautiful. That was magnificent.
All praises to the Most High, for it is written. You know what I mean? So that thing is certain, and you know, they don't really even have to surveillance us much now, because we've got turncoats amongst us that run back and tell them everything that they want to know, that sabotage plans, that you know, throw wrenches in plans, you know what I mean? Like, they're set plans amongst us that we need to be aware of. Now, am I saying that it's doomed for my brother who might perhaps be on the wrong side right now? That's not what I'm saying. We would be in error for hating our brothers and wanting something bad to happen to our brothers who might be on the wrong side, right? I want brothers and sisters to understand that at the time when King Dawid was, you know, about to take the throne, you know, just battles before, he's fighting with the enemy. He's fighting with the Philistines, right? So, you know, that's going to happen. You know, you got brothers who are on the wrong side right now, turning on their own brothers. It has to stop. Remember your people's struggle here. Remember the plight of your people. Return to Yahweh. I'll yield there.
Kind, 100%. That's absolutely authentic. You definitely want to return to the Father. You definitely want to serve the Most High, and the people that the Most High is going to be is invested in is going to be the children of Israel, despite what you believe, what you been taught. The people that the Most High is going to be invested in is going to be the children of Israel. Believe it or not, the earth was made for our sake, and that's what we got to look forward to. Our earth for our sake, for the sake of this people. That's why we've been the center point of everything. That's why they created COINTELPRO. That's why Hoover has such an issue with our people. Every situation, every term, every circumstance, if you look at it, it all centers around the so-called Negroes, scattered to the four corners of the earth. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and close this on out. All praises to the Most High. I hope you have learned something. I will say enjoyed yourself, but it's hard to enjoy yourself in the midst of reality that is intended to, you know, shock you into understanding. But we're going to go ahead and close this on out. We do this for a specific purpose. And why do we do it? Number one, we want to see our people saved. Romans chapter 10 and verse 1, brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to Abba for Israel is that they might be saved. We want to see our people saved. We want to see our people set free. And we want to see our people ready when the Mashiach returns, the Messiah returns. How are we going to do it? Number one, we're going to keep the faith in the Messiah. Number one. And number two, Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High and keep his commandments. for this is the whole duty of man. It is so very important to understand that in the conclusion of the whole matter, we are to fear the Most High and keep his commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. At the end of the day, when it is all said and done, all the dust is settled and all the smoke is cleared, we will be judged on whether we have feared the Most High and kept his commandments. Why? Because this is the whole duty of man. I am your Akazaki Yahoo, joined by my most esteemed Ak Akenanaya, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Hamashiach, Wamalak, Yahweh Shai, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who were scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say Shalom, Wa Baruchim, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day when the Most High brings us back together and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High Power, under one covenant, back in our own land, with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies, our adversaries, and all those who hate us under our feet. Until that day come, Shalom, family.
Shalom, Mr. Pekah.
All praises to the Most High. Praise you, Abba Yah. Kwam Yasha Allah.
Kwam Yasha Allah.
And Barak Hashem Yahweh.